The future of the EU-UK relationship. The EU IDEA project held a public event on the topic, organized in Brussels by the EPC, the European Policy Centre, in the framework of the Horizon 2020 project. The EPC is also coordinating the EU IDEA's Observatory on Brexit. The public event took stock of the situation and tried to analyse the possible implication of the negotiations and the outcome of the ongoing negotiations. Now we go a little bit more into detail with Nicoletta Pirozzi, head of the Programme on European Union at Istituto Affari Internazionali and EU IDEA project coordinator, Fabian Zuleeg, chief executive at the European Policy Centre, and Kati Piri, member of the European Parliament and co-rapporteur on the future EU-UK partnership. First of all, welcome Nicoletta, and the first question I have for you is the following. At the beginning of December, so now, it is not clear what is going to be about the EU-UK relationship. EU IDEA has its own observatory on Brexit, as mentioned already, and can help maybe to understand where we are and where we can go. Thanks to the contribution and the analysis already realized, what can we say about Brexit and the UK-EU relationship?
Yes, Emanuele, thanks. In our Observatory on Brexit, which we started in the framework of EU IDEA project and then will continue until the end of the project next year, we try to assess the future of EU-UK relations, in particular with reference to the three main policy areas that we tackle within the project. First of all, the access to the single market, then foreign security and defense policy, and finally, the area of freedom, security and justice. If we look at the results of the research conducted so far, we can easily say that a scenario of closer cooperation between the European Union and UK would minimize harm both from the EU side and the UK side, and at the same time be the most promising basis for fruitful cooperation between the parties, even in the medium and long term. At the same time, we found that the biggest threat for the European Union would be an unbalanced agreement between the European Union and UK, which would be realized in the case the EU will cross the red lines identified at the beginning of the negotiations, and so favor an agreement which does not provide an adequate balance between the advantages and the commitments on the UK side. This could, on one side, spark the desire for more differentiation among member states of the European Union, and on the other side also jeopardize the relations between the European Union and third countries with which the European Union has established differentiated cooperation agreements. In any case, we have to take into account the fact that the partnership agreement will not be the entirety of the future relationship between the EU and the UK, and there will be other areas that will need to be negotiated between the parties. I'm referring in particular to the foreign security and defense policy area. For this, it would be important from both sides to maintain an adequate level of trust. However, this trust has already been negatively impacted by the internal market bill and also the perspective financial bill on the side of the UK. And many observers started to fear that this trust will not be restored at an adequate level during the Johnson's government.
Since you have mentioned Prime Minister Boris Johnson, it has to be recalled that according to Boris Johnson, the US are considered to be a key and strategic partner once the United Kingdom will be out of the European Union. What can we expect from the incoming US president? And in foreign policy, can we expect a sort of competition between the United Kingdom and the European Union, since Europe wants to re-establish the transatlantic relationship after 5 years of Trump administration?
First of all, I think that the new US administration will be much more active than the previous one in favoring an ordered Brexit process. We all know that Biden is quite skeptical about Brexit, that will do everything possible to maintain the Good Friday Agreement, and also to try to have good relationships both with the European Union and the UK. Biden, on one side, is interested in keeping the EU on board to advance American interest, and on the other side, will remain close to the UK, which is still a very important partner when we talk about global finance, for example, but also the Iranian nuclear deal, climate change, relations within NATO, and so on and so forth. In terms of possible competition between the UK and the EU, I think this cannot be excluded. It will be a complex situation to handle in the future. UK will try to maintain its special relationship with the US and will try to maintain its position of the closer ally of the US in Europe. On the other side, the European Union will invest a lot in reinvigorating the transatlantic partnership after the Trump administration. The US, from its side, I think will try to keep the relations between UK and EU as good as possible, because I think there will be an attempt to avoid another area of crisis and instability in Europe. And I think this could come if the EU and UK relations go on in the path of a confrontational relationship in the future. So contrary to the former US administration with Trump, I think the Biden administration will try to pivot on both UK and EU to advance its global agenda.
If we want to try to summarize the public event on Brexit held today in Brussels, what can we say about the future relations between the European Union and the United Kingdom? There will be no winners, apparently, and there will be no win-win solutions in any case.
I think what we can say is that, firstly, there's still a lot of uncertainty, and that's quite shocking in many ways, because we have uncertainty even this late in the day, with only weeks remaining of the transition period, and still we don't know what is going to happen. And that, of course, also has a major impact on companies, on people who are trying to plan what happens next. Then when we're looking at the long-term relationship, we either will have a deal which will be much less ambitious than anything which was foreseen before. So it will be a thin deal in that sense. It will also be a precarious deal, because this lack of trust, the threat of the relationship getting worse in future will always hang over this deal. But that's the best possible outcome. The worst outcome is that we end up with no deal and potentially even have conflict.
What about in case of a no-deal Brexit by accident, which basically can still happen because negotiations are ongoing and we are basically running out of time? Can we imagine a sort of new transition period or not? Or there will be an hard Brexit with no rules whatsoever?
The difficulty is that to agree anything like the transition period is actually very complex, because the transition period covers many different areas. It essentially confers the benefits and obligations of membership, at least in those areas covered, which includes most of the single market, most of the economic integration. So if you were to try to replicate this at any point in future, you would have to draw up a new international agreement, a new treaty between the EU and the UK, even if it's only for a time-limited period. And that treaty would, by definition, be a mixed agreement, which would have to be ratified by all the member states before it come into force. So even under the best circumstances, it's highly unlikely that you can get something into place quickly. And it would still be very uncertain, because I think also many member states would not necessarily be particularly inclined to go down the same route again. I'm also not sure whether the parliament would be happy to go down this route. And it is also highly controversial in the UK because this is what some people have called the vassalship, subjugating yourself to the rules of the European Union, even if it's only for a temporary period of time. So I don't think politically it's very likely that you could go there. On top of that, the problem is that the end of the transition period really is a cliff edge, because the measures which apply to third countries will have to apply from the moment the UK has left the transition period. So you cannot find a bridging agreement. You cannot find something which stops that falling off the cliff. So even if you did have an agreement later on, a lot of the economic damage would have already happened. But in some ways, this is also a situation in which I would expect that the UK would make things worse, because if we end up in a situation where we run out of time, what would the reaction of the UK be in this? Well, firstly, I think they would blame the European Union. They would say, we were always flexible, we were always willing to go the extra mile, we wanted to continue negotiating, but because of their bureaucratic procedures, they had to say that they can't do this anymore. On top of that, you would then have the whole problem with the internal market bill, with the finance bill, where the Johnson government could not climb down at that point. They have put these bills against strong resistance within the British political system into the system explicitly as a contingency for no deal. They are not going to take them out if there's no deal. So if there's no deal, they will break their obligation on the Northern Ireland Protocol. And if they do that, then there will be no willingness whatsoever from the EU to offer them any kind of bridging arrangements, any kind of help. It will really be acrimony. We will be fighting each other in all areas of potential cooperation.
We know that since the very beginning, Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been considering the United States as strategic partner, especially after the EU membership period for his country. Do you think that the incoming US President Joe Biden can somehow mediate between the European Union and the United Kingdom in this Brexit issue?
If you had asked me that question, if we had the election of a new president a year ago, then I would have definitely said yes, it will have a big influence. But the problem now is timing. We are talking about an administration which will come in only in January. It will take some time before it's up and running. And by that point, all the core decisions on Brexit will already have been taken. And I think we know from Boris Johnson's behavior in the past that he thinks rather in the short term. He thinks about what to do next week, what to do to get out of a situation. And I think there's a certain belief there that in the end you can always make a deal. In the end you can always find a way of getting out of a tricky situation. So I would expect to have that threat of a future president at some point in future intervening is not going to constrain them now.
Brexit basically means uncertainty. It has been stressed and repeated by everybody, not only during the public debate today, but but of course it is already a synonymous of uncertainty. Is there any certain from the European Parliament side in this Brexit process?
What is clear is that we will not be able to have the normal democratic scrutiny that the Parliament normally has with trade agreements. Of course, we also know that it's the first time, hopefully also the last time, that an EU member state leaves the European Union. So we of course also understand that these are very exceptional circumstances. What we have said is that we would have needed by the end of October an agreement to, before the end of the year, to do the normal scrutiny process. And the normal scrutiny process in the Parliament would have been that the Foreign Affairs Committee, of which I'm the rapporteur, and the Trade Committee, of which my colleague Hansen is the rapporteur, can first do their assessment and then bring it to the plenary. This would have been the normal procedure. Now, I have to say, together with all my colleagues in the European Parliament, we have been extremely flexible when it comes to, of course, hoping that we will find an agreement, of course, not going beyond the red lines. And we will have an extraordinary procedure. And the extraordinary procedure will be that we are willing to work through Christmas to have an extraordinary plenary in the UK coordination group, which is set up in the European Parliament, where we have the chairs of the Foreign Affairs and the Trade Committee, and also individuals representing their political parties will be working on a joint resolution. But just to be clear, this is not the normal process, how the European Parliament scrutinizes trade deals. So yes, our patience is also running out, but I don't think we are the only one. I think the same is happening in EU capitals. We in the Parliament have also made clear that those provisions of the internal market bill, which are in contradiction actually in breach of the withdrawal agreement, will have to be off the table before we can ratify an agreement. I think this position has been also very clearly communicated on behalf of almost all the group leaders representing 95% of the members of the European Parliament.
Would be a no deal scenario a good scenario, as mentioned by Prime Minister Boris Johnson?
Although Boris Johnson said that a no deal would also be a good outcome, I think it's clear that the numbers disagree. This might be politically, ideologically a good outcome, but in terms of the economic effects on top of all that our countries are facing right now, of course, with the pandemic, I think is a catastrophic issue. And it's clear that the country losing most from a no deal in terms of at least economy will be the United Kingdom. And then, of course, it's true that we have this asymmetry within the European Union. The country I represent, the Netherlands, is one of the countries, together with Ireland and Belgium, which are among the top 3 of most heavy hit. And then, of course, specifically certain sectors. I think in case of a no deal, this means especially for road transportation and air traffic, we'll need to find agreements there. But of course, we also, and this is why, the patience is also running out, because everyone seems to be so focused on the deal, but we still have a lot of also contingency measures to legislate upon before the end of the year, also in the European Parliament, in case of a no deal.
Thanks a lot to our guest, namely Nicoletta Pirozzi, Head of Program on the European Union at Istituto Affari Internazionali, Fabian Zuleeg, Chief Executive at the European Policy Centre, and Kati Piri, Member of the European Parliament and co-rapporteur on the future EU-UK relations. For all Brexit updates and much more, please stay tuned on the EU IDEA channels.